Hey guys, just give me a second. Hey, stop that. Hey everybody, what's going on? And welcome. So I'm just gonna be watching a few videos. This was one I had saved on my watch later playlist, and I've I always save stuff to my watch later, and then I just never wind up going through it. I've got 283 videos on it, so this one's kind of interesting though. This is titled "Why Gaming Isn't Fun Anymore." So the thumbnail of the video says "Dark Age of Gaming," so I don't really know what to say why I think gaming really isn't fun anymore. And I wouldn't even say it's so much that gaming's not fun anymore. It's just that there's not a good game that like everybody is playing. Like everybody's like, oh, I've got to play this game. Like that. I mean, that was Elden Ring last year. So you had Elden Ring last year, and everybody was like, oh, I've got to play it. But like right now, there's just not like a major game that everybody's trying to play. So I think for me, that's a big thing of why gaming's not fun. Why do you think gaming's not fun anymore, baby girl? Hmm? Hmm? Why do you think gaming's not fun anymore? This is my little sweet kitty cat. I have another one. He's around here somewhere. He's probably looking out. He's probably in my window at the moment. But this one, she's a she's a lap sitter. She just wants pets. She wants scratches. I need to give them a bath because they've been scratching their necks a lot. I don't know if it's. I don't think you have fleas, but you obviously must have got something. That's right. You need a bath, sweet one. Yeah. Let's go ahead and start watching it.
If you were to look at the video game industry of today, you might think gaming is in a golden age. Video games have never been more.
So I did want to kind of talk about it. So like I said, I don't think there's like a major game. Like that's why I'm really hoping Diablo 4 is going to be. It's going to be that new game that like everybody is excited to play. Everybody's playing it. Um, I mean, I am for sure going to be putting in like a shit ton of hours on Diablo 4. Hey, 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 hey! Stop that! If you're gonna do that, you gotta leave my lap. You got me? Um, so that's kind of my hope with Diablo 4. But realistically, I think that we're in a dark age of gaming because there's just not like if you look at how many AAA games used to come out and were just like top tier, like you had Bethesda that was putting out AAA games, which they're not doing anymore. Potentially, whenever the new Elder Scrolls game comes out, they have Elder Scrolls Online. They've been writing Skyrim's dick since 2011, and then you're kind of riding off the how good their games used to be, and then they really fumbled with obviously with Fallout 76. Um, we've lost a lot of other major AAA developers like BioWare is gone. I don't know if they're gone, but Anthem certainly destroyed them, which is disappointing because actually Anthem looks like it's a ton of fun, but the story is just really boring. Um, but the flight mechanics are really cool. I think they really should have kept with it and tried, and they could have turned it around. I think, especially now when there's a lot of people like me who are just looking for a game to play. But I think it's still available to play, which is surprising, but also good for them. So you're also seeing that there's like a lot of companies that are AAA companies that are just putting out shit games, and like for instance, Battlefield 2042. I was like, oh, it's gonna be so good. I'm gonna play the hell out of it. Thank God I didn't. I played the beta and it was an absolute fucking disaster.
Popular. Professional gaming is a growing and respected sport, and game publishers see record profits year after year. This surface-level success, however, conceals many of the core issues plaguing modern games. Hypermonetization, egregious laziness, and a total lack of passion or vision. In terms of quality and actual care put into games, modern gaming has been on a consistent decline for close to a decade now.
I think this is a big problem. I think game companies just aren't willing to say, hey, we need more time to make these games now. But I think it's also interesting, like, if we look at the games they're putting out now, why is it that it's so much harder to make a game now, like Battlefield, when they were putting out good Battlefield games for years? I mean, Battlefield Bad Company 2, Battlefield 3, Battlefield 4, Battlefield 1, all were really good games and ran pretty well on launch. But for some reason, they all of a sudden can't figure out how to make a Battlefield game. They didn't even have a fucking scoreboard in Battlefield 2042 right at the beginning, and I think don't even know if there is one yet. So it's kind of crazy that it just blows my mind that a lot of these companies that are putting out games that they used to make, they can't like just go port the old game to Unreal, to the newest Unreal Engine. Like it's not that. I mean, I say it's not that hard, but it just kind of blows my mind, honestly.
From predatory microtransactions, to broken, unoriginal games, to the current drought of new and interesting IPs, gaming has been reduced from a form of entertainment and artistry to a corporatized money-making venture. As someone who's been into gaming for the vast majority of my life, as someone who genuinely appreciates the
Actually, it's interesting that he showed Wind Waker. I'm actually not a big fan of any of the new Zelda games. Not a big fan of I didn't like Breath of the Wild, and while I think Breath of the Wild 2 is really cool, I don't. I just don't like the open world aspect of it. I think it kind of takes away from what Zelda was to me. Like Zelda is Wind Waker, Zelda is Ocarina of Time, Zelda is Link to the Past and Link's Awakening, Twilight Princess. It's all these, it's an arcade game that's a pseudo open world. You know what I'm saying? Like it's open world, but you have a certain tier of progression. I don't like open world. Like I like to know what I'm doing. I like to know when I'm playing Ocarina of Time, I got to go get the 3 spiritual stones, then I got to I got to go beat all of the temples, and then I can fight Ganon. You know what I'm saying? That's what it is to me. Like I'm not a big fan of like Breath of the Wild. You could literally just start it and then go fight Ganon right from the get go. As far as I know, I think maybe there's like 1 or 2 things you have to do before you go fight him, but I was told you could literally just go fight Ganon right from the beginning. Um, which I'm not saying that's a reason. That's the reason I dislike it. I dislike it because it's open world and there's just so much shit to do in it.
passion and artistry present in games. This mass
I
corporatization and denigration of the medium is depressing at best and infinitely vexing at worst. I know I'm not alone in this stance either. The countless failures and
hmm. I do think microtransactions are an interesting topic to talk about because pretty much every single game has microtransactions these days. I'm also extremely pissed about Overwatch 2. They essentially, I wouldn't say that they owe anybody money. I think anybody who just bought Overwatch 2, um, I think I want to say it was free even before they launched Overwatch 2. I mean Overwatch 1. But if anybody who paid for Overwatch 1 deserves to get their money back because you're forcing people to pay for a game before, and then you deleted that game to re-release that game free to play with a bunch of microtransactions. So you at least owe people $20 back because that's what they were selling it for, was $20. Um, but in my opinion, I played it on Xbox. I easily got my, actually technically I got it for free because when I bought my Xbox, it came with a free game. I picked Overwatch, so I got that for free. Um, but honestly, I thought the microtransactions in Overwatch were fine. I think if they had added in something like a battle pass, you could already buy. I think it was what you could buy chess or currency. I couldn't remember exactly which one.
disappointments of the
Cyberpunk should never have been released on the PS4. The PS4 obviously could not run it correctly. They should have just released it on modern gen and PC and just said fuck the PS4 and Xbox One. I think that would have not completely solved all their problems, but I think that would have saved them honestly. I mean, Elden Ring released on them, and I'm really surprised about that.
modern games industry has left most gamers tired and frustrated. To that end, and want to chart the slow descent of this once great industry, look at where it's heading, and what we should do in response. Like and subscribe. Before we can discuss the dismal state of modern gaming, I want to first look at the era which preceded it, along with what made it unique. I think few would argue that the mid-90s to late 2000s was a true golden age of gaming, and for a number of reasons. While the actual quality of games from this time period can't be understated and will be discussed, one of the biggest factors in this golden age was the state of gaming and the broader games industry. Gaming was considered a more nerdy or unusual hobby back then. You weren't getting bullied at school for not having the latest Fortnite skin, but for playing video games in the first place. This relative unpopularity meant that the games industry was just a fraction of its current size. Conversely, game developers and publishers were much more numerous back then. Various small and independent groups all competed in the open gaming market, and you'd either sink or swim depending on the quality of your games. While many studios sunk, those that swam were handsomely rewarded, and typically redoubled their efforts for their next project.
There he is. There's the hidden
these
Remy.
Small studios were often staffed and led by dedicated gamers and enthusiasts.
There you go, buddy.
This naturally leads to much greater passion and
chill,
care
chill,
put
chill,
into the games
chill.
they produced.
Hey.
Take, for example, Bungie back in the early 2000s. Their singular goal when producing the Halo trilogy was to make the best, most enjoyable game possible, and it shows in their outlook.
The difference between good enough and awesome is so big, and I mean, there's this standard set by everyone here that, I mean, good enough sucks. You can't do good enough. It's a hard kind of thing to live up to, but it's I mean, the game's going to be better for it.
We are the most cynical people. Like, we are the jaded crowd who, if a game doesn't entertain us in 5 minutes, we stop playing it.
The passion you see here is honestly commendable, and was something found in abundance both at Bungie and the broader games industry.
Come on.
In addition to having an industry clearly committed to quality, the technological development seen in the 5th, 6th, and 7th generations dramatically expanded what could be done with video games. This is perhaps best demonstrated by the transition from 2D to 3D, swapping pixels for polygons. An additional dimension not only enabled new and interesting forms of gameplay, but allowed for beautiful art styles and actually realistic graphics. These are your killer 7s for the former, and re-4s for the latter. The size and scope of games also increased substantially in this time period, going from megabytes in size to gigabytes. Whereas games on cartridges had to make best use of very limited real estate, CDs allowed for about as much game as you wanted, and at then modern graphics. Finally,
I'm not even sure if PS3 games even use that full 60, and not even all the Blu-rays that came out on the PS3 are 60 gigs. I think it's what, like 25, 50, and then there's 60 gig, I think.
Internet access had reached hundreds of millions, even billions by this time period, meaning games no longer had to
And actually, the cool thing about Halo 2 is I had my Xbox modded back in the day, and you could actually go into the disc. You could put the disc into the Xbox. You could go into the file browser, and you could actually just transfer just the multiplayer for Halo 2 onto the hard drive of your Xbox, and then just play the multiplayer.
Merely single-player or couch co-op titles. In short, the games industry not only had the technology to make new and engaging games, but the will and passion to do so, and I feel the results truly speak for themselves. Gaming during this golden age was, as the name implies, a pretty good time. Quite simply put, gamers were spoiled for choice in the 90s and 2000s. While shovelware and cheap cash grabs certainly were a thing, you had an absolute smorgasbord of quality titles to choose from no matter what you were looking for. If you wanted to play something on your own, just pop in Tony Hawk or literally anything from Nintendo at the time.
And actually, it's funny, he's shown both Ocarina of Time and Twilight Princess, which is nice. I wasn't as big a fan of Twilight Princess or Wind Waker, but I definitely look back on them way more fondly now. And actually, when the Wii U was announced, when they announced the Wind Waker Special Edition bundle, I actually wound up buying that, and I really enjoyed the game. Beat it.
If some friends were over, you had Halo or Mario Kart to rage at and laugh over.
Or Mario Party.
And if you wanted to meet cool new people on the wide world of web, WoW was still relevant, and not terrible. Gaming as a whole was just fun. People treated it as an enjoyable, exciting hobby. You'd hear from a friend that the new Scrimbo Bimblo slaps, drop 40 or 50 bucks on it, and have a good time.
Love it, new Scrimblow,
Gamers
Vimblow.
had hope in the industry, and while expectations weren't always met and missteps were had,
I think it's interesting he's showing a lot of like Crash Bandicoot and Tony Hawk, because that's actually what I've been playing a lot on my PSP. Has actually been well, I don't have Crash converted yet, but I've been playing a lot of Vice City Stories and Tony Hawk Pro Skater on my PSP. But I
Sounds
had
good.
Tony. I think I still have some of my PS1 games somewhere. I'm not sure exactly where they're at, but they're somewhere.
for a time.
And I think I still have Tony Hawk.
Unfortunately, all good things must come to an end. The Roman Empire experienced unmatched prosperity and security for hundreds of years, before its slow and pitiful death in the 5th century. Gaming is no different, and much like the Huns and Goths who brought low the Romans, it was an outside force which plunged the games industry into its dark age, the smartphone. In 1998, Nokia released their 6110 model of mobile phones. The 6110 offered numerous improvements and
tank.
updates over the earlier Nokia 2110, one of which being the addition of Snake. Snake is a game you've likely heard of, seen, or played at some point. You play as a snake navigating a plane in search of food, and need to maneuver around your ever-lengthening body as you go from point to point. It's a simple little game, something you could play for a few minutes at a time, but its inclusion in the 6110 was one of its most liked features. In line with this, mobile phones going forward would often include short little games similar in scope to Snake. Many of these games were shipped with the phone itself, and while it was possible to download additional games, they were never terribly common or popular. The system, however, would be completely turned on its head in 2007 upon the release of the iPhone.
The iPhone, yep.
The iPhone, and more specifically its App Store, offered users a variety of apps.
But I was under the impression that the App Store wasn't even out initially. I thought that the iPhone didn't launch with the App Store. Like it had like a, not the App Store that we know now, but like it had like a more limited App Store.
Applications and games for purchase. Much like the iPhone itself,
Oh man,
the
Angry Birds
storefront
was so
proved wildly
popular.
successful.
But they ripped off Crush the Castle, I think is what it was called.
Though it
But
released
I'm pretty sure Crush the Castle was out first and then this released.
with only 500 apps, in just 2 years this number increased to well over 100,000, and these
Yep.
apps were downloaded over
That's what I mean. They had like very limited apps.
2 billion times. Initially, the App Store would sell their games for a one-time, upfront cost. You know, how games were always sold. This business model would eventually be expanded in 2009 to give apps and their developers new and exciting ways of making money. The biggest addition were in-app purchases, a system we would now call microtransactions. While many apps made ungodly amounts of money off this system, perhaps the most influential and iconic game in this landscape is Candy Crush.
People
Candy
still
Crush,
play it to this
released
day.
in late 2012, is nothing special as a game. You match 3 pieces of candy in a row to earn points and accomplish objectives. Match 3 titles had been around for some time and have had successful entries such as Bejeweled. What sets Candy Crush apart from its peers, however, was its method of monetization, predatory microtransactions. While Candy Crush was free to download, it was seemingly designed to incur, then profit off of addiction. First and foremost, the actual gameplay rewards you at every step, complimenting and praising you for making the right move or just having pieces fall in the right places. You're given dopamine hit after dopamine hit with easy levels until you reach a difficult one you can't quite beat. Candy Crush operates on a life system, and once you run out of lives, you're cut off from the flashy lights and easy dopamine. You can either wait a ridiculous, uncomfortable amount of time until you can get your dopamine fix, or just pay 99 cents for an immediate refill. Both options funnel you into playing, and eventually paying more and more, and it was this Skinner box design that led to Candy Crush's success. To put it in perspective, Candy Crush alone brought in about $1.1 billion in 2014. That same year, the entire games industry had revenues of $85 billion. A single game with a basic art style and simple gameplay loop made up over 1% of the games industry, all because it had an unbelievably effective microtransaction system. This runaway success told the games industry 2 things. First of all, video games were big money, a business venture that could be insanely profitable.
Out of all those games, I only really played Clash of Clans. I have played Clash Royale, but I've never paid anything to play it. And realistically, you can really play the game free to play and not really struggle to climb in it. And there's never really a reason to pay anything to play that game. Same thing with Clash of Clans. A lot of these mobile free to play games, the way it works is either you play free to play, and you spend a shit ton of time playing the game so you can keep up. Or you have pay to play, which you just pay and you don't have to waste all that time playing the game. And yeah, that's really kind of how it works. You either pay to win, or pay to advance to get better at the game, or you spend an ungodly amount of time. Same thing with all these gacha games nowadays.
This is not to say the
You
games
either
industry
come and you play every single day, say it like with Honkai Star Rail, or you just don't. You pay to get your stuff unlocked.
wasn't already massive. It was raking in tens of billions at the time, but it put into perspective just how much money you can make off of games. Second, a game doesn't have to be good in the traditional sense to be profitable. Making a game that is legitimately fair and enjoyable doesn't have to be a prerequisite for success. It just has to have the right mechanisms to fleece people of their money and have them come back for more. It was around this time period of the early to mid 2010s that you
I think that this is actually why Gears failed, because you didn't really like Gears of War 3 was probably the Gears of War that I played the most. I'd probably say Gears 1 I played a lot of, but I didn't have an Xbox, so I only ever played it at my friend's house, but we would play it a lot. But Gears of War 3, that by that point I had an Xbox 360, and I mean I played the absolute hell out of that game. And it had no microtransactions. You bought the DLC, you bought the season pass, they got you all the DLC, and you played the multiplayer after you beat the single player games. I think there were skins you could buy, but I didn't really buy into that at all. I think that's one of the games I do have on my shelf is Gears 4, but yeah, I think that's the reason why Gears of War failed. In all honesty, there's just not a lot of like replayability. There's nothing to grind for in the game. Like you could grind for skins, but that was really about it.
began to see the exportation of this philosophy from the mobile market to gaming as a whole. It's this philosophy which treats games more as a dry
I think
business
also
just to make
smartphones
money,
got better, so
rather
mobile
than an
games got
earnest
better.
form of
So
art
you're
and
kind of
escapism
competing with mobile
that
games
led to the
too,
slow
which
decline of
look
gaming.
mostly just most of the mobile
For
games look
anyone
just
who's
as good
paid
as
even a modicum
console
of
games.
attention to the broader games industry over the past few years, you'd find it mired in scandals, mediocrity, and disappointment. The reason for this goes back to the philosophy shift mentioned
It's
earlier.
funny they're
Games
showing
aren't being
Anthem.
made to be enjoyed, but to make money. It's this hard shift in priorities that has just gutted the soul of gaming and replaced it with flowcharts, focus groups, and revenue projections. Take for example.
And here's and actually okay, so they're showing Battlefront 2 here, so this is good. So here's the thing. I think Anthem's gameplay is actually really fun. I've seen people play Anthem and I saw that and I'm like, damn, that actually looks pretty good. I'm not even gonna lie to you, it looks really good. And I'd also argue Battlefront 2, even when it had this pay to win system, was really fun. People complain about you having to get these. You had to get. I don't even remember how it
The
worked.
explosive growth in microtransactions over the past decade or so.
You had to open up these. You had to open up these crates, and then you had these crafting parts. You had all this other shit, and then I'd eventually let you level up. Sorry, my Remy wants out. Battlefront 2 was really fun, and actually, I think either 2017 or I think it was 2017, Christmas of 2017, or maybe it was 2018. I can't remember. It was one of those years. They sold a special edition of Battlefront 2, and if you bought it, it gave you a fully upgraded card for every single class, and then from there I was just able to play. I was able to max all my characters, and actually, I would argue that you could still play against people that didn't have max cards. If you didn't have max cards, you could play against people that had maxed cards. Like, I feel like Battlefront 2 very unfairly got hit by this. There are microtransaction systems that are way worse than this now. Games that have microtransactions are way worse than this now. Battlefront 2 is nothing, and they turned it around. They got rid of that whole they got rid of the card upgrade system that they had before, and now it's a level up system with the points. Like you level up, you get a point, you can put it into a card. So yeah, I would argue that Battlefront 2 actually was not that bad, and the game is insanely fun. I just can't get it to load for some reason. It sits loading. It sits on the loading screen infinitely, and I cannot get it to actually load.
Such as slow progression, unbalanced gameplay, or a lack of content. This isn't a mistake. These issues are introduced on purpose, with the only way to overcome them being microtransactions. It doesn't matter if fair systems are dropped for a less engaged. gameplay loop. It doesn't matter if microtransactions prioritize the size of your bank account rather than in-game.
Now, Diablo Immortal. Now, here's the difference, right? Mobile games were always going to have microtransactions, always, because most of the time they're free to play, and every free to play game has microtransactions. The only free to play game that I think got the microtransaction system right is RuneScape. They had a whole free to play game, essentially, at least a 60-hour game if you're new, a gaming experience if you're new, and definitely way more than 60 hours, I think. I mean, probably not more than 60 hours, but you could probably spend about 40 hours to beat Dragon Slayer if you wanted to. If you know what you're doing, you can do it quicker. But for a new player, at least a 60-hour game for free. And Dragon Slayer is pretty cool, honestly, for a free quest. And then you pay per month, and you unlock a whole another game, essentially, with thousands of hours of content in it. So, yeah. But Diablo Immortal, I hate. It is the thing. I hate when people bring this up because mobile games were always going to have microtransactions. So when I heard that they were coming out with a mobile Diablo game, I was like, oh, it's going to be microtransaction filled. And like you see here, it costs $110,000 to fully gear up in Diablo Immortal.
Skill. It doesn't matter if microtransactions have led to some of the most addictive, predatory systems imaginable. Microtransactions make an incomprehensible amount of money. That's the only
I would trade Overwatch 2's microtransactions for loot boxes back.
reason they're so prevalent. To the games industry, it's more important that their septuagenarian shareholders see a 15% APY
Bobby.
than actually give their customer base a semi-decent product. Outside of making games with these predatory, money-first systems, modern games are often released in a broken and buggy state. The recent poster child of incomplete garbage is none other than Saints Row. Aside from having some genuinely cringe-inducing writing and gameplay that's boring 2 hours in, the game just does not function. Pull up literally any full-length review, and you'll see a deluge of bugs, glitches, and broken features in this game.
God
Saints
damn.
Row isn't an outlier in this regard either. You had Battlefield 2042 last year, and Cyberpunk 2077 the year before that. Both incredibly hyped games that should not have shipped in the state they were in. The people at the helm, and more specifically the publishers, just stopped caring. They knew a bunch of gullible saps and stupid teens would drop $60 on their latest shitfest, so why even bother? Worst of all, if a game totally flops, many of these studios and publishers are so large they can just eat the losses, shelve their broken game, and move on to the next lazily made entry. Finally, this corporatized, business-centric approach to game development has just killed any passion and vision within the larger industry. Rather than
So another good franchise they bring up here is Assassin's Creed. I was extremely hyped for Sea of Thieves because I was expecting it to kind of be like an Assassin's Creed Black Flag style game, and it was nothing like that. It looked really fun, and until I actually played it, and then I was like, wait, there's like nothing to do. Like, you need other people playing on the server at the same time as you to have fun, and then there was just nobody else playing. Like, I don't know what happened. Like, I don't know if we were just on at bad times, but there was literally never anybody else on when we were playing. So it was just us running around doing these quests, trying to boost our favor with a certain faction, and it was boring. It's a beautiful game that's boring. Now, I'll argue that hilariously the best Assassin's Creed game isn't even an Assassin's Creed game, it's a pirate game, and that's Black Flag. Assassin's Creed Black Flag is hands down one of the best Assassin's Creed games I've ever played. Had it on the Wii U. I beat the fuck out of the game. I played it so much. I 100% completed the game. One of the few games I've ever actually 100% completed. So,
than prioritizing player experience and creating new IPs, game developers are more preoccupied with garbage sequels, unnecessary remakes, and shameless trend chasing. For me, the epitome of this visionless, trend-chasing game development has been the new Halo trilogy.
Warzone is actually really fun to play. I
use the term
enjoy it.
trilogy loosely here, as the stories in each game have little to do with each other and are all pretty mediocre in their own right. Outside of this lackluster writing, every new Halo aped mechanics from other popular games, presumably because money. 4 has score streaks and loadouts, 5 has pay-to-win loot boxes, and Infinite has a live service season pass that's so barren and devoid of content, it's genuinely shocking. One of the most groundbreaking, influential, and just plain fun series ever created was utterly castrated by out-of-touch, money-first suits. Most tragically of all, this fate has fallen countless other IPs and series, all reduced to shells of their former selves by visionless hacks and unoriginal frauds. The AAA games industry has fundamentally regressed. Its
I didn't get Vanguard, but I will argue that Call of Duty World War II was really fun. It was like finally we're going back to like World of War, the old boots to the ground gameplay from COD, and it was genuinely really fun. It looked good. The guns all felt somewhat decent, and it was just all over. It was all around a fun Call of Duty experience, and I put hundreds of hours into that game. Played the absolute fuck out of it. But I would say Halo fans, I feel really bad for them, but you have like 4 or 5 games on the 360 that are great. You can play Halo 1, 2, and 3 on the 360, and you can play Reach, and you have Halo 3 ODSTs. So
priorities totally misaligned with the point of gaming.
When it was when
unfortunately,
the game went downhill, Halo went downhill when 343 got their hands on it. Halo 4 was fun, the multiplayer was pretty fun, but I mean, I played it for like a week and then I was bored and
it's a
stopped
situation that I don't see changing anytime soon. It's blatantly obvious that money is the biggest, if not single motivating factor in making games nowadays. And if that's the industry's goal, then they're certainly succeeding. There's no longer a major incentive to make interesting or good games.
I don't
when
play
you can
Madden
just
anymore
copy-paste
either.
Total schlock every year
Madden
and
is just a
still make
complete
billions.
garbage game now.
You can vote with your wallet to change things, sure, but the next whale they catch completely cancels out whatever difference you might have made. Furthermore, the AAA games industry has largely consolidated under a select few major corporations and studios. This, coupled with the increasing barriers to entry due to technological advancement, means there's little reason for innovation.
I think there's a lot of indie
and few
studios that
grounds
are
for
making really
competition.
good games right now.
The whole of
If
AAA
you're
gaming
wanting
has
to
just
look for
become
it.
stale and sad.
I'll agree with this, and I've pointed out quite a few different franchises that are doing not a great job these days. But I would say that I think I've kind of like I used to like playing a lot of single player games, and I didn't mind like for instance, Black Ops has an amazing single player campaign, and actually I'd say that a lot of the Call of Duty campaigns are actually decently fun, but I'm not going to play any of the newer ones. Because then I would have to buy them, and Activision won't lower the price of them, and I'm not paying $60 for Black Ops 3 on the PC. But I would say that what I like to do in gaming has shifted. Now I like to play competitive online games. So I don't even really play a lot of single player games. I like to play Rocket League, League of Legends, Heroes of the Storm. Going to be playing Diablo 4 when that comes out June 2nd.
And out-of-touch ghouls like Phil Spencer and Andrew Wilson are perfectly fine with that. I mentioned at the beginning that I discussed what should be done regarding the modern gaming industry's dismal state, and I feel the best option for gamers is nothing. The modern games industry at this point is a joke. I think by now this should be fairly obvious. Huge conglomerates just push out unoriginal, unenjoyable, and/or incomplete titles year after year, yet are able to bank off of microtransactions and a lazy consumer base. Unless CEOs actually start caring about art, outside of money laundering, or if predatory microtransactions get regulated into oblivion, I highly doubt there will be any major changes in the industry. So why bother with it at that point? It's better to avoid this constant deluge of disappointment than hope COD 37 will be marginally better than its predecessors. Instead, rather than deal with the cultural void that is the modern games industry, just go back to that golden age. A friend of mine remarked that it's sad some of the best games ever have already been made, and while this is pretty accurate, it's also true. There are countless excellent titles from back in the day that many of us haven't gotten around to or didn't hear of when they were released. They're games often made with passion, and because
I
you
really
couldn't just
want to get
patch in
this Sly
fixes
Cooper
back in the
collection on
day,
PS3s.
they're actually complete.
Um,
Furthermore,
There's a
strong
ton of really
communities
good
for
game
retro
collections
titles
on the
are still going
PS3.
strong to this day, be it for speedrunning or just
God
for
of War,
enthusiasts of a particular series.
Sly Cooper.
Alternatively,
They're kind of expensive,
while AAA
but
publishers and studios have seemingly abandoned passion for green slips of paper, you're much more likely to find well-crafted, lovingly made games from indie studios. From early classics such as Super Meat Boy and Binding of Isaac, to recent titles like Hades or Ultra Kill, indie games have consistently churned out innovative and engaging games actually worth your time. While there are weird and bad entries in the indie scene, at the very least it's a space that cares about the art of gaming along with their community. Finally, if you absolutely have to play the latest Gears of Halo Theft Auto 5 or Gorbino's Quest, get it at a discount. Or, at a discount. All in all, even if the modern games industry is in its dark age, it doesn't mean gaming has to be. There are more than enough excellent games, new and old, to play and enjoy. Games that are free of the hollow influence of this once great industry. Thank you so much for watching this video.
No, thank
While
you for
haven't
making
covered
the video,
gaming
honestly.
content much on this channel, outside of a video on last year's Activision fiasco, it is a topic I am interested in and fairly passionate about. The general state of gaming at present, along with my discontent for it, was something I wanted to discuss, as it's been a perennial issue for years now. I hope you found my perspective on this matter interesting, or at the very least informative. Maybe leave me a little comment with your thoughts on this. With that out of the way, shake hands with the like, hug the subscribe button, and that bell. Until next time, take care.
So I can see he's got another video here titled "Why Indie Games Are Beating AAA Games," but I think it's because there's a bigger degree of freedom that indie developers have. AAA developers are held to a really high standard, and the problem is they just can't meet that standard anymore, which is weird, but also kind of makes sense when you think about how large games are these days. People want the best looking game these days, but I would argue that there are ways to make these games, like good games, that look good on the cheap. For instance, I'll give an example. If you take any of the GameCube games from back in the day that had 480p, for anybody who doesn't know, some of the GameCubes that were made have a digital port. So there's a really expensive cable you can get that you plug into the digital port and gives you component out, which is like what, red, green, blue, white, red plugins. So you get the component out cables, and you can play in progressive 480p progressive scan, and that's what you need to play on. Like for instance, I have a little adapter here. Let me grab it real quick. Sorry, I'm trying to do. She's napping. I have this adapter right here for the Wii. It's Wii to HDMI. Has a little audio out if you want to use that. You don't really actually need it apparently. So Wii to HDMI. So you can use this. You can play, which will allow you to play GameCube games at 480p, and that'll allow you to play them on like an HD television, and they'll look fantastic. Like I played Sunshine on there, not recently, but I think like in the last 2 years, and it looked fantastic still. I was like, holy shit, look how good this game looked. And this came out in the early 2000s, so it would have been what, like 2002, I think is when Sunshine came out. I know it showed it earlier, but I think it was 2002. Oh, she's a little sleepyhead. So yeah, like you can still make, like, I don't know why companies aren't doing more cell shaded stuff. Like look at Wind Waker, it looks fantastic, and it still looks good these days. Like I don't know why companies aren't using that style. They're all doing Unreal Engine shit, doing the hyper realistic looking games, and honestly, those kind of games you can do other stuff, guys. You don't have, not every game has to be made in Unreal Engine. You can do cell shaded stuff and make it look good. You can do these smaller games like what indie companies are doing and make a fantastic game. That's all people want. You take a look at Elden Ring, and in my opinion, I thought Elden Ring was kind of bland, but it was a fantastic fucking game. You know why? Because it just fucking worked. It looked good. The gameplay was fun. It was exactly what Souls fans were hoping it was going to be. So it's just really interesting that that AAA companies are just like falling behind, and I don't really understand how. When they have all this money and all they do is just go and buy other developers. I'm just like, just make decent games again like you used to. I get that it's a lot harder to make these games when they get to like 100 gigabytes in size, but look at what indie developers are doing. They're making fantastic games. So yeah, well, that's pretty much it. I'm gonna go play some League again.